What's up, Simonics, and welcome back to a little adventure into the world of RxJS. After the video we had on Promises and Observables, you asked for more about RxJS, so here it comes, 2 parts on different operators from RxJS that can be really helpful in your applications. Because let's be honest, if you are not very confident about using all of those operators, those functions, it can be really scary sometimes to look at these huge blocks of pipe. We got a retry, switchMap, map, filter, everything going on, and you don't really know what's going on with all these different operators. I don't know about you, but I never really read through the whole documentation of RxJS and then immediately applied everything in my project. I just gradually added this and that, the map and the switchMap, and over time this built up. So in this video series we will take a more practical approach, and I will show you functions for those operators and how to use them and what the result of these functions look like and why they can be handy for your applications. And you don't need to remember all of them, really. Just go through the video and try to find a few concepts that you can use in your applications, and the next time you will find something else in the next video perhaps, and otherwise you can always look them up on Learn RxJS, but I never really made it from that into my code, so I hope these practical examples will help you. Let's dive into our RxJS adventure today. Alright, so I've prepared a few examples so we can go through the different categories that we got with RxJS. Don't have to mind all of this. Let's start with creation. Creation means creating an observable, and there are different ways. For all categories, I will just highlight the things that I found most important over the last few years that I've used them. So the first example is using the from. From helps to convert an input to an observable. And the cool thing is from also converts a promise to an observable. For example, if you're using Capacitor storage, storage.get, this is usually a promise. As you can see, then catch finally. Also, if you're using Ionic storage, that would also return a promise. And usually handling a promise in combination with an observable is a bit tricky. So the easy way is to simply wrap that call with a from, and suddenly it becomes an observable and you can subscribe to it. It's now really the same. I can just call this my from example, and where's my Chrome? Let's see. It calls this, okay, I get value null because there's nothing stored for the test key. But you see, using from is a super easy way to convert something to an observable. We will also see from in a different usage later on. This can be really handy if you have some kind of authentication logic where your token is stored in local storage or capacitor storage, and you need to get the token first and then attach it to the HTTP call. So you can have subscribe, then you can, or you have a pipe lock, then you map the result. We will see those operators in a second. So that's from. Next one is off. Off also creates an observable, basically from a result. I don't know, off, let's say off a result. And this can be really helpful if you want to implement something like caching, or if your functions complain. For example, you do something like, oh no, I don't have any linting today. Can we allow this? Okay, this makes it like this. Let's add a type, so we make this observable any. And if you then use a function like this, you will get a red line because type number is not assignable to type observable. Sometimes this can happen. You either want to make an HTTP call or something that returns an observable, or otherwise maybe return some kind of static data. And in that case, off helps to convert some data directly into an observable. For example, you could make an HTTP call once, then store the result in a variable. So let's say my var, and then you could return just off this dot my var, and everyone would be happy because you're still respecting this signature observable. So off also creates an observable. From and off, definitely 2 things that you should know about. Let's fix this once again. All right, let's dive into the next block, which is combination. I will follow basically the headlines here, combination, condition. Well, we will get to basically everything of these, and I just picked the highlights of them. Combination means combining your observables. And the cases we now have are mostly similar as we use them. So let's call this fork join example. Let's see, we create two observables to make two HTTP calls, and then we call fork join and pass an array of those two observables. Now, when is fork join useful? Well, it's really useful if you have an application that maybe needs to make multiple HTTP requests directly in the beginning to like get the user data or get some configuration for your application like colors, and you want to perform all of them. And as you can see here, fork join example, the result, an array of the two results from our two HTTP calls. It's basically, as I have added the comment, similar to promise.all, which is used for promises to fulfill all the promises. The only thing you need to watch out for is this won't emit if there's an error. So if something like this is wrong, let's use something wrong, then we would only get an error and no result. So you really need to be careful and take care of that. You could also handle the error, of course. But usually fork join is really powerful when you just have multiple observables and you just you don't really care about which of them is executed, and you just want the result of all of them. And then I got two more of them. I got zip. So we see it's a similar setup, only that we don't have to pass an array and we just pass a list of observables, and we also have combine latest. Now, if we call the zip example or the combine latest, we will see that this will actually return the same. So let's do this. We do zip, we do combine latest. Let's check it out. And the result for zip is an array with our two results. Combine latest is an array with our two results. So basically they are doing the same, but this can be different depending on the input source. So zip only emits when both sources emit a value. If one of them isn't emitting anything, well, then you're subscribed and you're not getting any result. And combine latest is actually really only helpful if your sources can reply different results. For example, if you're using Firebase, then the underlying collection data might change. And then with combine latest, if one of these observables changes, so let's say both are an observable to a collection and one collection changes, then it would already emit a new value. So this really emits a value when any observable emits a value, and it will just take the last value from the other observable. Combine latest basically meaning combine the result of both observables and take the latest possible result. Merge example, no, it's called just merge example. The operator is of course not called merge example. The operator that we want to check out here is merge. Merge turns multiple observables into a single observable, almost like we did before, but watch out what the result now looks like. The result is actually that we get 2 times the execution of our subscribe block. So here we got the log, console log merge example, and we got it once, we got it twice. So it's not like fork join combining or zip combining the observables into one array of result and returning that, but simply merging all observables into this stream of observables. And whenever there's a result from observable, it will emit the value to your block. Once again, it's not really super helpful with static APIs where you just make one call. This is mostly better in combination with APIs like Firebase or, well, where you get multiple results on the observable stream. So these are examples for combining observables. Now let's dive into the next block, which is transformation. And the first one is actually the most easiest RxJS operator that you, I guess, will have used, and that is map. Map simply means we got the result from our call, and we want to somehow transform it. For example, we got the result here, so people1 returns something like this, and we are only interested in this property. So we could simply map the result to return only the films, and if we would now call our map example, let's go back to it and hit save. What we see is that within our subscribe block, we only get back that property. This is really helpful because usually you should have all your logic inside the service separated from your controllers. And therefore, the service can take care of mapping the right values. Perhaps you have some kind of nested data and for a specific function, you just need to return one property. Then it makes totally sense to directly apply the operator here within the block inside your service and filter or map the right values. And then your controller can just use the result, and you don't have to put this logic of changing the data in your controller. Next transformation is switchMap. I think this is also something I use very often. SwitchMap means switching to a new observable. So here we return plain data. We got a JSON and we return a different property, or we return true or whatever value. With SwitchMap, we can now return a new observable. So this is a new observable. Let's say we're gonna extract the first film from that array and we're gonna return that call. This means we initially make that call, but automatically we switch another hood to the next result. And if we call our switchMap example now, I can just dive back into it. We're not getting anything like this, but now we're getting back data for a film, a new hope, whatever, all the information of a film. Once again, it's really helpful to have this kind of transformation in your service. You could have a lot of this chained, different maps, different switch maps. And so in the end, the final result just arrives in your controller and the controller can work with it, and all the logic is happening in your service. Switch map and map, definitely something you need to know about. Next step, filtering. Well, the basic version of filtering is just this. It's what a filter does, right? You know what a filter does. I just used this example, which creates from also an observable, so not just used for promises. This will create multiple observables, and we're gonna filter the result and only return values if the number is bigger than 2. So let's add this, give it a try. And guess what? The result should be that we don't see 1 or 2 and only 3, 4, 5. This can be helpful, or we used this actually in the past when we had a behavior subject. We will get to that as well, where we had to filter out null values. So you can really easily filter out null values like this, and this makes life a bit easier. Take is another operator that I use a lot, because take makes sure that you only take one result and then finish or close the observable. This is important if you're thinking about memory leaks or managing your observables. There are other ways to manage your observables with unsubscribe and take until, what we will see next. But take also make sure that it's just called once. And usually for standard HTTP call, I usually also add take one as we just want one result. This is something you should also just try and use in your code. Next filtering, or that actually belongs to the category of filtering, is take until. Take until is also really helpful, as you could basically put this into all of the HTTP calls in your service. We're creating a new subject. We will talk about subjects in the end again. It's basically a specific type of observable, and in or when our page or service or anything is destroyed, or perhaps when the user logs out, you could call next and complete on the subject and feed that subject to the take until operator. This means we will only keep this observable open until this happens. So in this case, until the destroy is completed. Take until could also have a value, like take until this whatever value. That would also work. But this is a super easy example of making sure that you're unsubscribing from observables at the right time in your services. Take until really cool as well. Now we got something a bit different, and that is the debounce time. I think, yeah, this still belongs to filtering. Debounce time means a little delay. I can best show you this with a form that I created in the beginning. So we have a little form group. We're going to comment this out. And within the init, we create a form with a username. So inside the view, I just connected this, my form control. Now you could, for example, subscribe. That's not what I wanted. What was the example that we want to call? I think debounce time example, right? Are we subscribe? Yeah. This subscribes to the value changes of your form, but by adding a debounce time, we will only get values after this 2-second delay. So let's see. We put in something, and after 2 seconds, we get the result. Now, why is this helpful? Imagine you have a search bar and the user types something, and whenever the value changes, you want to make an HTTP request to search something. That would mean the user types A, B, and you would fire up all the requests. And it makes a lot more sense to have a little debounce time, perhaps not 2 seconds, maybe like 400 milliseconds. No, that was the place where this belongs. And then the user could type in a search string, search what, and then it would execute after the user stops searching. So debounce time is automatically applied to the Ion search bar. There's actually a quick example, Ion or I.search bar. Is it in here? Yeah, there's actually already a debounce value for Ion search bar automatically, but in other cases, like we've seen here with our form, debounce time is something that you can add to manually add that behavior. And now on top of that, there's also distinct until changed. I don't use this very often, but it can come in handy. And that means only emit value if the value is different from the previous value. You can use this without this function, so you could just use it like this. It will make a strict comparison on the object. We will do it like this with the actual comparison and check if the previous username is equal to the current username. And we're also going to use, let's say, a 2-second debounce time. So let's call this in here, distinct until changed example. And now what happens is that we type AA, we get the log username AA. We add something, BB, we get the username AABB. Now the user types something and ends up with the same result. And as we can see, we don't get another log because this value isn't different from that value. And that's exactly what distinct until changed does. It's a simple comparison, and if the input or the stream didn't change, we won't emit a new value. Alright, and that's it for our first part of the adventure. I hope your head's not spinning right now after those 10 or 15 operators that we've seen so far. One final note. In most cases, I used an HTTP call because that is the most common form where we use them. But we have the example with our reactive form, which allows to subscribe to the changes, and that is a different example. So these operators, the whole RxJS stuff, isn't just focused on changing your HTTP calls and the results from your API calls and make everything work. It's really just for observables. An observable could also be a stream of events from a button. It could be the changes from your reactive form or anything like that. Once again, really take it easy. If you don't understand all the concepts of this video, or if you don't use all of them tomorrow in your application, that's really not a big problem. But try to gradually use some of them in your projects, and you will feel more confident with them over time. And then you will add the next one, and you will see the benefits of changing this data flow within the pipe block, or having a finalized block, or of these different operators in general in your applications. Also, these are not all the operators. I just picked my, let's say, favorites and the ones marked with a star on Learn RxJS. you can check out the page, really a great page once again. And if you got any questions about the things we used, or if you think there are other operators that you've used that are more helpful, leave them in the comments. And of course, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode of our RxJS adventures. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope your code gets a bit better. I hope you learned a bit about RxJS, and I will catch you next week like always. So happy coding, Simon.